Hi everyone. So for today's book review, I'm going to review Oscar Wilde's popular novel, The Picture of Dorian Gray. Um, this book is quite popular. Um, it's kind of like a cult classic. If you haven't read the book, you probably know the story. It's about a young man who is absolutely infatuated with himself. And he's beautiful, and he's powerful, he's rich, he's all kinds of amazing to himself. Um, and he has his portrait painted by a man named Basil, however you want to pronounce it, depending on which side of the ocean you're on. And he he has um, this very sinful life, and the more he sins, the more he ages. But the trick is that he never physically ages, the portrait does. So it starts getting marred and discolored and cracked with what would be considered age, but it's the signs of sin. So I'm really not sure why a lot of people haven't read this. I've asked people, do you know the story of Dorian Gray? And they say, of course. Well, have you read the book? No. So, it's a shame because um, not only the story is amazing, but it truly is a work that can only be appreciated when it's read and then reread again and again. Recently, I read it for the second time, and I plan on reading it for a third. Um, and Oscar Wilde weaves a beautiful story through many different types of cascading delight with words. He's very talented, and he has many epigrams, and he just makes the story rich with vocabulary and syntax that for me as a geek is just amazing. But for the layman that just wants to read it, it's very rich with beautiful images and sometimes horrifying images. Um, each sentence is as interesting and beautiful as the last. And, Wilde really speaks of sin conveyed in one of the most interesting manners that has ever been written about, through a portrait. Um, so truly Dorian, who is our main character, is a fall from grace. He's a Lucifer in this world, and he could look at what he's becoming, but he keeps the portrait shrouded because he doesn't want to see it. So perhaps also the concept of the devil hanging over Dorian's shoulder throughout the entire course of the book is really what makes the story so interesting. Dorian always has a choice, and he always chooses wrong. Sin, as I said before, never weathers Dorian's face, so he remains as beautiful as he was when he was in the prime of his youth. And only the telltale signs of his age and sin and hate and cruelty are etched upon that portrait that was painted. When you get a description of it, it's very ugly, and it portrays every crime that Dorian ever committed. And, this isn't really much of a spoiler if you know the story. If you don't, stop listening. But even towards the end of the novel, when we wish that he would just become good, the old sin cannot be washed away. That's always going to taint him. And so living with that, Dorian can't conform to the good life, and instead chooses once again to force himself into this unknowing demise of sin and the concept of hell, because he can't cope with the prospect of living a wholesome life. So he would have to give up the sweet taste of sin, and he had known that all of his life. So it's a very interesting book, and it is quite a good read. It's not outside of our language and our typical ways of speaking, so it shouldn't be that difficult if you're a little intimidated by 19th century literature. So yeah, pick it up one day, and I think you'll find that it's really interesting, and he had a really good idea to portray, Oscar Wilde that is, had a really good idea to portray sin through a painting, and to see just how disturbing it could really be. So if I was to give this a rating, I'd say 5 out of 5 stars. And yeah, so thanks for listening, and I'll see you soon.